1, 2, 3 months.
Thank you.
2.
All right. Yours is louder than
He's not
mine.
with me, yeah.
Anyway.
He can ask the next one. We're getting paid by the word, so.
I know, I would. That's 5 keep going.
That sort of imagery that you found to collage. I mean, collage is a very precise sort of art. You have to sort of figure out, well, this image will work well if I place it against this image, which will completely, subvert what the message is supposed to be. The original message is supposed to be saying. I mean, all three of us are from the 50s, aren't we? That's the era we're coming from. We're coming out of the Second World War, you know what I mean, with the sort of post-war baby boomers in a way. Yeah. And everything was sort of fashioned to sort of say that everything's going to be all right now, everything's beautiful, everything's, we've got all this new technology taking over and everything, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I think
you want to create an artificial euphoria. Make people feel
an artificial euphoria.
Stable to buy.
And so I suppose that when we grew up and we could look at it again in another way and we rejected it, that came as a horrible shock to our parents and peers. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they just weren't expecting us to do that. They thought we'd be grateful for it.
Yeah, I bet they were sorry they won the war.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, while we're talking about the Second World War, John Heartfield, who was your grandfather, who was the German anti-fascist and anti-Nazi photomontageist, very, very brave man working in that period and almost like a soldier of art, really. And surrealists, Max Ernst as well. They were influential on your work as well, weren't they?
Absolutely. I probably should. John could declare me on his taxes as a dependent because his grandfather's work was such an inspiration.
How did you come across these artists' work?
I didn't know about Heartfield's work until it was when the Democratic Convention was happening in San Francisco in 1984, and a friend of mine showed me a book that was as thick as a phone book about all of Heartfield's pieces and his life and era. And I thought, where has this guy been all my life? I had seen a couple of images in school books, but I didn't know who had made them. That one about the church that looks like bullets, it's bullets made out of the church. Mm-hmm. And I was so happy to discover it. So it also was nice to know that it wasn't just, my whim to make these anti-authoritarian things, that there was actually a solid backbone of experience, artistry behind this and went back a couple of generations. And then, when we would do these things that are anti-authoritarian, it was for laughs. It was like down with Big Brother, or down with Nixon or LBJ. But when your granddad was doing this, they were going to hang him if they could find him.
Well, they could find him. They did try to hang him.
Put his head on a stick.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a bit more about your grandfather while we're on this particular area.
There's a lot to tell. What would you like to
Well, I'd just like to sort of maybe you could just give us a short, brief, biographical portrait.
Sure. He was born in Berlin in 1891, and his parents were rather mentally disturbed, and the father moved the family around the countryside because he would write these plays that everyone wanted to throw him in prison for. And finally the father decided it would be a good idea to take them all out to a cottage in the woods. At that point there were 4 children. My grandfather it was 1899, he was 8 years old, and the other 3 children were younger than he was, 2 sisters and a brother. And one night, shortly after they moved there, the father just left. And then probably about 3 or 4 days later, the mother just got up, Alice, who had problems later on, just got up and left. So now there's 4 children in the woods, all alone. And my grandfather is walking around and calling for his mother. And I tell that story because I think it shows that very early in life, he understood that unconditional love was for animals. Unconditional love was not for people. If you love someone unconditionally, sooner or later, bad things were going to happen. As well as he had a tremendous feeling against injustice. He took everything that was an injustice as a personal affront. So we'll pop ahead. He became an oil painter, and then he met George Gross, and basically the Dadaists came. Dada started in 1916 in Switzerland, and then Richard Feuchtenbeck, the writer, made a speech in Berlin in 1918, and Club Dada started with Fritters and Hannah Hawk, who everyone should know and love, right? Hannah Hawk, and my grandfather and George Gross. And George Gross and my grandfather did a lot of work together. And basically the idea there was if the whole world was changing, it was a quiet place around the turn of the century, and suddenly there were radio waves and automobiles and noise, and Gross said that, if you wanted a flower or a human being, then you should just take a photograph. That's what you should do. But if you wanted to make art, you had to do what Winston does. And it's very funny because when you were talking before, I was thinking a lot about Winston and Winston's collages. And I think what happens in Winston's collages, he said, well, I didn't want to be a painter, is there's a lot of truth. A lot of truth comes in your collages right away because you use real things to make your collages, and then you put them together to tell your truth in your collages, and it all comes together that way. You're not just painting some truth out, you're like putting them together. And so I'm jumping ahead.
I'm trying to make them look like, or be like allegorical images.
Exactly, yeah.
Like in the old days, they make allegories of truth, beauty, justice, and and in this case, it's what we've surrounded ourselves in our consumer world with those standards that are sometimes artificial and usually misrepresented, but to have them two bad things put together sometimes makes one good thing. So 2 wrongs actually do make a right.
Right. Like when you use a bomb coming down on your collage into
into a suburban backyard.
Yeah. There's something more to that than just painting a bomb in a suburban backyard. So 1921, 1929, my grandfather did the graphic designs for a publishing house called Malek Verlag, which was run by his brother, and he did all the graphic design. And he invented a lot of things. He revolutionized typography. He invented the concept of a book cover that tells a story from the beginning of the book to the end. And he began to tell social stories. He began to tell stories about how an old Jewish man was sitting on a corner looking at his past, and then on what's it called, the middle of the book, the spine, he had like a young boy looking at his future on the back of the book. And now he comes into what he's most well known for. He's 1930, 1938. He did the photo montages of the Nazi period, which were satiric. They always have to be satiric. You're right. They have to be funny, and they have to be satiric. And he answered Nazi propaganda, which was extremely good, with humor. Humor.
Powerful.
Right.
Showing a light on these things.
Right, just what you said.
They're tragically funny.
Yes, very. Well, yeah, it's like if Goring said, that iron made the nation strong and butter made the nation fat, then my grandfather said, "Yay, there's no more butter." And he did one of those political collages. He did 240 of them from 1930 to 1938. Think about that. That's almost one a week from conception to thought to answer to making the collage to taking it to the rotogravure masters to yelling at them for screwing up his collage to going home. He worked 7 days a week on 3 hours a night sleep and made the Third Reich angry enough that when Hitler, through the Enabling Act, took over and was the chancellor and complete control of Germany, in March of 1933, April 14th, 1933, Easter Sunday, the SS came to assassinate him. He jumped through the door. As they were banging on the door, he jumped through the French windows of his apartment. He landed badly on his ankle, crawled to the back of the alley, and stuffed himself because he was 5'2", which is about there, and about 40 kilograms, soaking wet, into a trash bin. And of course, the SS were walking around, no SS officer could ever believe that someone would go into a trash bin. So they ripped apart his office, his apartment, and they destroyed much of his art. And then he walked across the Sudeten Mountains to Czechoslovakia, where he continued as a wanted man. Same thing. Excuse me. 1938, when the Germans invaded Czechoslovakia, there were 85 people on the most wanted list, the Gestapo's most wanted list. He was number 5.